When I was 13, somebody gave me a tree. It was a bar mitzvah present. I didn't know who gave it to me or why. I just remember picking up a piece of paper from the gifts table. It was very official looking, and it told me that a tree had been planted in my name in Israel. I didn't think about it much, not till many years later, when I went to Israel for the first time. All my life, I've been told that I had a deep connection to Israel, the land, the people, the history. It was as much a part of growing up Jewish as bar mitzvahs, Passover seders, and Friday night dinners. I felt that, all that. But I also felt strangely disconnected. What really tied me to this place? I don't know why, but I started thinking about the tree. It was my only real connection to the place. It had been here all these years, my stand-in. I decided I needed to find it, to look upon it, to see how it had grown, to touch the earth from which it had sprung. There was just one problem. I had no idea where it had been planted. So when I got back home, I searched the house for the certificate, hoping it might reveal the location of my tree. I thought maybe I'd stuck it in the bar mitzvah photo album, which captured the party in all its 1970s glory. After all, it was here, at the celebration of my passage into adulthood, that I'd received the tree. No such luck. Perhaps I'd pressed it like a leaf into one of the tomes of Jewish history and culture that had been bestowed upon me that night. Nope, not here either. Clutching at archival straws, I even tried to find some footage of the party, hoping to spot the moment when I'd grabbed the card from the table. Sadly, no one had recorded this momentous occasion, not like when Dad first got his shiny new toy, the Kodak Brownie, and shot everything in sight. Family vacations, Friday night dinners, and of course, bar mitzvahs. And this is my brother Jeff's bar mitzvah. It's Jeff. Those are my parents. You can see why they had 8 kids. All boys, by the way, but that's another story. Anyway, at some point during the dancing and eating and speeching and candle lighting, I would have wandered over to the gifts table. And this is my bar mitzvah again, and picked up the certificate. Was it from an uncle and aunt? Cousins? It was starting to look like I'd never know. But then, in a box of family mementos, I found something.
Oh.
A tree certificate. Not mine, but a certificate all the same.
Memory of our dear grandmother and your beloved mother.
And on it was written the name of an organization, the Jewish National Fund. Seems they were in charge of the tree planting. Seems they'd planted a lot of trees. I sent them an email asking if they had a record of mine. Sorry, they said, we don't keep copies of tree cards. So I tried the main office in Jerusalem, and while I waited to hear back, I chased down another lead with a couple of my brothers.
So when is the great renovation happening?
My younger brother Jamie had mentioned that he'd had a tree planted in Israel many years ago and was sure he had the certificate. I figured since we were so close in age, our trees might be planted in the same place.
Mr. and Mrs. Cyril Sherman.
Oh, look it. It's us.
Some of us.
Okay. Oh, by the way, here's Shandel Gangbar. Here we go. Bingo!
In memory by his grandson, Jamie Sherman, Beth Tikva Hebrew School.
Wow.
So it was actually a tree that he'd planted in memory of our grandfather. Jamie would have been 8 or 9 when he did this, collecting stamps at Hebrew school, 10 cents a pop, till the card was full.
There's even a description of Canada Park.
Read it.
Okay, for over 70 years, the Jewish National Fund has performed miracles in changing Israel's swamps, desert, and rock beds into land on which farms and settlements have prospered.
Isn't that fantastic?
It was fantastic, but it still didn't tell me where my tree might have been planted. So it was off to the place where I'd become a man, lo, these many years ago. Maybe they could tell me something about my tree.
Welcome to the administration wing.
Thank you.
1975, these were classrooms.
Why make me start at 8 years old to prepare for my bar mitzvah?
Well, no, I think probably your parents wanted to instill some Jewish tradition. The notion was that you should have at least 5 years of Jewish educational background before you had your bar mitzvah.
Right. Boy, did I get some background. I learned to read and write Hebrew, though not speak it. I learned about Jewish history and culture. And I learned how to sing the blessings for the big day.
That's right. You know what? I need to get you a kippah.
I put my hand over my head.
No, stop.
Oh no.
If this is not...
Kosher. The classic. Okay, now I have a yarmulke.
That's right.
So, Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvorach. No,
That's right.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvorach, right? Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Lolam Ba'ed. But it is amazing how it stays with you and it comes back so easily. And then some talk about me, and I'm welcomed into the community, and I get a couple of gifts.
And here's when the rabbi would present you with a certificate and a pin.
Shalom. The tree certificate would have been here. See, always in my mind, I got that certificate at the bar mitzvah party.
No, it was probably
Right,
on the bima.
right here. Wow. So JNF has this connection to the shuls,
That's right.
and probably has for a very long time. Yeah. So who might have coordinated the JNF connection, the tree program back then?
Well, Stuart Raisin
Okay.
and his assistant Lillian Cornfield worked here for 25 years, and then she became the executive director.
Oh, Lillian Cornfield.
Yes.
Okay. So she knows where the trees are buried.
She might.
She did. Turns out, before she ran Beth Tikva, Lillian Cornfield was at the Jewish National Fund, taking tree orders, which is how she got her nickname.
Did you start as the tree lady?
Yeah, that's where I went as a tree lady. There were lots of trees coming in. Obviously, if there was enough to employ 2 women 5 days a week. And everything was typewritten. We were on typewriters. And they would give us the information. We would produce a card or a certificate and send it out. Except for the bar mitzvah ones, we would make up certificates and send them to the synagogue. And on the morning of the bar mitzvah, the rabbi would say that your parents have made a donation to the Jewish National Fund in your honor and present you at that time with the certificate.
Oh wait, so you're saying it's possible that my parents donated the tree?
I would think it probably is. They wanted you to go to shul, and it was important to them. So if a letter came from JNF and on the morning of your bar mitzvah, they were going to do it.
Sadly, they're not around to ask, but...
Look at how many years and something touched you. It may not have when you were 13, but something has touched you that you want to look into this.
Do you have a tree?
Yes.
Or several trees?
Several trees.
What does it mean to you to have trees planted in your name?
Because I feel like although I live here, I'm part of Israel. I haven't been there for many, many years, and I probably, unfortunately, will never get there again. So part of my beliefs and my love of Israel, and I'm there. Like, I have a tree there.
Wow.
Lillian was right. My parents had given me 2 presents that night. The tree and the desire, 40 years later, to go and find it. I'd booked a flight to do just that.
Looking for my tree. Hello. How are you?
By now, I'd heard back from the JNF in Israel. They also said they couldn't help me. So I hired a researcher, tree searcher. The JNF keeps its records, at least some of them, in the Central Zionist Archives, a bunker of a building just outside of Jerusalem.
So this is the entrance.
Central Zionist Archives.
Yeah.
Where are the Western Zionist Archives? Okay, so you've been here twice
Yeah.
to search for my tree, and you think there's a good shot that today we might actually find a piece of paper that says Jason Sherman.
Yeah,
On it.
because I found some receipts from that years, and I found some Shermans.
Let's get out of this rain. Let's do it.
Let's go.
I'd asked Arit to focus on the years 1975-76,
There's a lot of stuff here.
since that's most likely when my tree would have been planted. We looked through reams of material, spreadsheets, brochures, letters of thanks, certificates, but my card wasn't among them. Arit did, however, show me the three most likely locations of my tree. Forests planted in 75 and 76 with Canadian connections. Two of them were near small towns. The third was Canada Park, the same place where my brother had planted a tree. Turns out, it had opened the year after my bar mitzvah. There was also a lot of stuff signed by someone named Harris D. Gulko.
Gulko.
Seems he had a lot to do with Canadian tree donations.
Yeah, he's all over.
I made a mental note to look him up. Maybe he was still around.
I have to wait till I get home to do that. I have some clues. Green clues.
It would have been nice to have had someone from the JNF along for the ride. I wanted to know how it had all started, how we got here. Instead, I had to resort to reading about it. I'll try to keep it brief. Back in 1901, the Jews of Europe are being massacred in pogroms and generally despised wherever they go. Now, a lot of religious Jews held on to the idea that one day the Messiah would come and all would be well. Then along came a guy named Theodor Herzl, who called bullshit on all that and said, no, what we really need is our own country. So he starts the World Zionist Organization, a group of like-minded people who looked around and said, how about Palestine? After all, once upon a time, the Jews lived around those parts. I mean, we're going back thousands of years, but such was the desperation of these folks who called themselves Zionists that they... Sorry, said I would keep this brief. Point is, they agreed that Palestine should be the once and future home of the Jews. And they got this dude from England, Lord Balfour, to write a declaration to that end. See, Palestine was being run by the British after the First World War. Anyway, a couple of problems right away. One, the Jews didn't own any land there. Two, other people did. And these other people were Arabs. Not a huge problem in itself, since at this time the Arabs and Jews actually got on okay. But in order to buy up land, on which they would eventually settle people and plant trees, the Zionists needed to raise cash. Lots of cash. To understand how they did it, I met with Gadi Kafir,
Zionism and games, that's the subject.
a retired engineer who's written a book about the early history of the JNF and how they raised money using an unusual strategy: games.
A lot of my study is about the JNF, because they were the one who led to sell, in brackets, Israel. They were the one who made the games in Israel. Many games there. What is important for the game maker is to say how important is the land of Israel for the Israelis, for the Jewish people. Here's a game which is connected with the JNF.
Okay.
It's a puzzle of the map of Israel. It was done on the 30s. There's no mention here of Arabic villages, or very, very few of them. It has names in English.
Yeah. So who's this for? If it's in English.
It was done to sell the JNF in the diaspora, in countries where they speak English. It's selling the JNF, promotion of the JNF.
Yeah.
80 such games were made and distributed to JNF offices all over the world. And along with them came a plea for cash.
This blue box was standing on Friday close to the candles in order to remind people to contribute money.
Wow.
So many of my games have a written page which says, don't forget that we as a JNF help you to buy the country. 1 coin, 1 cent, because the many, many cents were collected to the JNF.
Okay.
To show me how all those cents were put to use, Gadi brought out one more game.
Oh.
So I'll show you a game which actually tells the story of the JNF. It is called Domino Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. It starts from here. Here's Hatchala. Here's the blue box collecting the money.
Yeah.
Then the boxes are brought to Israel. The JNF starts to work the land, plant trees from a nursery, bring
Livestock, animals?
livestock, animals, and chicken and everything. Work with tools,
There we go. Okay.
tents to live, and then they build a house, and they have children. Then you have trees
Yeah.
and fruit trees.
There we go.
And at the end, the boxes are dancing with the bags of money.
They dance in the Hora.
Yes. And here's the end. This is the end.
Sof.
At the end of the day, we have more trees every year.
And that's the work of the JNF?
Yes, it is fantastic.
We're connecting the dots, or
The games kept the dream of a Jewish homeland alive. The Holocaust gave it urgency. And in 1947, the United Nations voted to divide Palestine into Arab and Jewish states. War ensued, and Herzl's dream became reality. The JNF soon changed its official name to Karen Kayemet LeIsrael, which literally means Perpetual Fund for Israel. Kakal, as people called it, shifted its focus from buying land to improving it. Cover every hill with trees, said Israel's first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion. Make the desert bloom. Jews in Israel and around the world were asked to contribute, either by planting trees themselves or donating them. Everyone got in on the act. Everyone. It became such a part of the culture, they started making movies about it.
אדון, בשביל מה זה אדון? אני מקים שלט בשביל אדון אחד שתרם את הכסף בשביל היער הזה, ידידי. הנה בא בעל השמחה. Mrs. and Mr. Birnbaum, this is your forest. לא רוצה תמונה. מה זה אדון? עוד אחד? מה זה? זוהי עונת התיירות, ידידי. Mrs. and Mr. Sonnenschein, this is your forest.
240 million trees, and now it was time to find mine. This is Neve Elan, a small community near Jerusalem. Back in 1976, Canadian trees were planted here. Orit had found a document in the archives calling for millions of trees to be donated, but in the end, only a few thousand were. Still, one of them could be mine. Out there. Somewhere. I was excited, nervous. Here I was, steps away from gazing upon the very tree that had been planted in my name. What was it like, this tree of mine? Had it shot up tall and strong? Was it in a dense stand, indistinguishable from those around it? Or did it tower above its own kingdom, providing shade and nutrients to those below? Whose hands had placed it in the ground? An American volunteer, come to Israel for the summer, gently patting down the soil, soaking its roots before moving on to the next? Did she know it was my tree? Or had it been planted impersonally, by man or machine, one of thousands, one of millions? Well, this was ridiculous. What was I expecting? To find a tree with my name on it? Hell, I didn't even know what kind of tree I was looking for. Elm, oak, lemon. I realized I didn't know a tree from a hole in the ground. I mean, when I was growing up, this was what a maple leaf looked like to me. I needed a tree expert. And since the JNF was still giving me the cold shoulder, I went out and found one. This is Ishai Schuster, and he's the gardener at Kibbutz Mefelsim. Years ago, the occasional rocket used to land here, fired from
Fly
Gaza.
above us. From time to time, they're landing here and there.
Okay. So the JNF offered the kibbutz a unique idea, a stand of trees to block the view.
Security forestation, that was the main idea. Fortunately, they didn't shoot. Yaur Bitchoni, that's the name in Hebrew. It's called the Atlantic cedar.
Atlantic cedar.
You plant and you forget it.
Right. I asked Ishai what kind of tree mine might have been if it had been planted in the 70s. He told me the pine was the most popular tree then.
We planted a lot of them. Call it Jerusalem pine.
Jerusalem pine.
Why was the Jerusalem pine so popular?
Because it grows very fast and acres and acres became green.
I asked him to show me a pine that might have been planted closer to the time of my bar mitzvah.
This is, I think, 7.
So this is what my tree would look like.
Yeah, probably.
That's when Ishai gave me some bad news.
All of Israel, they plant this pine. It was a very big mistake. A lot of problems. They have a very small root. There was a storm, and 40 of them fell in 1 hour, like a dead man.
Wow.
The branches are go down, and you have to cut them. And then the upper branches are also going down.
Okay.
You see the rope there? We tie it because it's some days they're gonna break.
Yeah.
And this is maybe next year will fall. You can see bigger one, giant one, very old.
The one leaning out.
Part of it fall some years ago and almost crash a house.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous.
Oh, great. So my tree could have been a murderer.
Another thing, when it's alive, it's very flammable. Not like other trees, because they have inside saraf. I don't know. When you cut it, it goes something sticky. It's stuck to your hand. Sap, I think is the word.
Yeah.
And it's very flammable.
So sap is fuel.
Yeah, when there's a very big fire in the Carmel Mount some years ago, it exploded. The trees, it was very hot and very dry, and the flammable trees, it goes very fast.
In a matter of hours, it had become the biggest fire in Israel's history. Tinder-dry pine forests exploded. Firefighting soon gave way to a rescue operation.
As the fire is spreading with the help of southwesterly winds, the main job now is to evacuate the houses.
The scale of this fire appears to be beyond the capabilities of Israeli emergency services to deal with. These prisoners were safely rescued, but a bus carrying prison officers to help with the evacuation became trapped and crashed in the chaos. It's believed all on board were killed.
I went to see the Carmel for myself with Salman Abu Rukun, who once managed these forests and knew many of the young people who died that day.
In this area we have prison.
Yeah.
Damun prison. And they came to help the fire.
Evacuate the prisoners.
Yes, and they say, we don't need now help. The prison was empty, you can go back. And when they came back, the fire was close to the road, and they struggle with the fire, and they have no chance. Yeah.
Terrible. Some hard lessons were learned that day. Salman wanted to show me one of them.
You can see where all the pine in that area burned.
Yep.
Here we have oak, and the fire was so close, but the oak stayed.
It's incredible. Are oaks planted throughout Israel at all?
No. All the oak in this area, natural.
Just here?
Yeah. In the first 5 years, they go down with the deep roots. The pine, up. They prepare the pine because you can see it. It appears fast. When you planted it, 4 years, you have an area with green trees.
Why was it so important to have the fast-growing trees?
It's a good question. Maybe because they came from Europe and they're all pine trees, so they like the pine. Planted, it's okay, but not everywhere. It's sad to say that after we have 44 people that died, we know what to do. Ask the ground, ask the
ground.
The soil. See the pine? No one planted it. Everything natural. But they began from the roots or the seeds. The pine from the seeds.
As Salman showed me around the new growth, I got to wondering what kind of trees were being planted now. The next day, there'd be a good opportunity to find out.
This is the festival of Tu B'Shvat, Palestine's Arbor Day, an annual occasion for planting trees, and in Hebrew tradition known as the New Year of Trees.
In fact, I'd timed my visit for this very reason, so that I might see the same rituals that attended the planting of my tree 40 years earlier. Or not. A huge storm had swept through the country. Tu B'Shvat was rained out. On this hillside near Jerusalem, there were supposed to be dozens of people planting trees for loved ones. But all I found were empty holes and drooping flags. So I decided to go to the JNF's main nursery nearby. They had told me I was free to do so, and I figured they wouldn't be very busy today.
סליחה, אתה מדבר באנגלית. Okay, תודה. I'm making a documentary.
Did you call to the Kakal before?
Yeah, we were told, yeah, just come on Tu B'Shvat. Someone could show me around and...
I can show you around.
Oh, can I get my cameraman?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. What's your name? Park by the tractor there. Come say hi.
Wait a minute.
Oh.
This is from, I think, which channel or something?
No, we're from Canada. It's independent. It's...
I see. Independent. Wow.
Oh, if you'd rather not, okay.
Because I must get
permission. Sure.
From the JNF.
Okay.
Why was it so hard just to talk about trees? Were they worried I was going to steal their secret recipe for making forests?
We cannot
serve
you, and we hope you enjoy.
Is there a reason that we can't talk to you?
We are simple workers.
I understand.
This is the order.
I understand.
And we follow it. Tu B'Shvat Sameach.
Okay.
Tu B'Shvat Sameach.
Kicked out of a nursery. It couldn't be any clearer. Call them what you want. Kakal, the Jewish National Fund, the biggest planter of trees in the world. Whoever they were, they didn't want to talk to me. Not about my tree, not about any tree. So I found somebody who would.
Kakal calls themselves the biggest environmental NGO in Israel.
This is Alon Rothschild. He works for the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel, a name that Alon takes very seriously. And he wanted to show me a new forest, one where the JNF was planting trees.
The Goa forest.
Pine trees.
This is a mature forest. You can see that it's very dense. Pine trees are not native to this area. You can have an argument if you like it, you don't like it, but that was planted by the law. But that's a grassland. You have lots of light because you don't have shade. Then you have a huge diversity of insects and reptiles and birds. And they are used to this open landscape habitat. And this area is not designated as a forest. In Israel, we're supposed to have a process in which the public, through the planning committees, the government, all the representatives, can consult, discuss. The committee decides, then they publish the plan for 60 days. Yeah. And if anybody has something to say about it, he can post an objection. They discuss it, and then they decide.
Sounds reasonable.
That's the process. Now, one day, I come here, I see new roads, I see the signs, and I see lots of planting sleeves. Carl came here like burglars in the night and decided that this place is not only going to be something that is against the plan, they also are going to have profits from it, because for each young tree here, they got paid from somebody, but I'm not sure that the people who contributed the money got the opportunity to understand the consequences of what they paid for. The question is, should we have trees here?
Yeah.
You see the other hill over there?
Yeah.
It's also a grassland. They also want to plant over there. Why? These are the last grassland hills on this area. And you have so many pine forests over here. Why do you need another one?
Who's this guy?
Probably the keeper here.
Really, I don't want to get involved, but I'm with the Jewish National Fund, so I heard you speaking about the JNF. I'm responsible for this area.
Okay. I had a tree planted in Israel from
With
my
the Jewish National Fund?
Yeah, like this could, maybe that was my tree over there, and I'm just interested in, yeah, sure. 40 years ago, right? I mean...
I wouldn't like to comment on it right now because as we have a very strict order to avoid being introduced without the...
Of course. Do you know that this area is not designated as a forest? It's outside Tama 22.
What other thing would you like to do with this barren land?
Barren land?
Yes.
This is barren?
This is a stony hillside.
Yeah, it is barren?
It's not barren.
Did you plant it?
I take it back. I take it back. You are a fanatic in the sense of barren lands, and I'm a fanatic in the sense of forestation.
I just came here to look for my trees.
Have you been in the Northern Negev lately?
Northern Negev is another issue altogether. I'm not going to get into it.
Of course not.
It's so much politicized. Not for me.
I felt like I'd taken the wrong path, wandered down a side trail far from where my tree might be standing. I needed a break. And as it happened, I was about to catch up with the only family I had in Israel. It was a Friday. The country was shutting down for the Sabbath. It had been 20 years since I last saw my cousin Susan.
Shabbat Shalom.
Cousin Jason.
And her Orthodox Jewish husband, Dov,
This is Dov. This is Jason.
who's not so Orthodox
He
anymore.
looks like his brothers.
I told them what I was up to.
A tree has been planted in your name in Israel.
And what if somebody told you you had a tree planted in your name and nobody planted a tree in your name?
You've been here how long?
All told,
Yeah.
35 years.
35 years.
When I came in 78, there was some hope. What's his name had just been here, the Egyptian guy?
Sadat.
Sadat, yeah.
Yeah.
And they had the big party,
Yeah.
and they were thinking peace,
Right.
peace, peace,
The
and then they had
handshake
Jimmy, yeah.
thing.
But from there,
Right.
not one good thing has happened in this country. It was made even worse by Rabin getting killed.
Mr. Rabin was hit as he reached his car. The police hustled the assassin away. Later, he told them that his orders came from God and that he had no regrets, because Mr. Rabin's pursuit of peace made him a traitor to his people.
And ever since then, it's just been terrible. There's been apartheid, separate rules for Arabs, separate rules for Jews. Not separate and equal, but separate and separate.
Listen, the worst is that you were embarrassed also to be an Israeli.
We sat down for a nice local meal of lasagna.
In my opinion, the Jewish people, right, we didn't have many choices. You beat a dog, be happy it doesn't bite you, right? Jews have been beating all the time and still loyal citizens to the country they're coming to, right?
It's easy to forget where, why Herzl wrote that book.
Yeah.
Why the early Zionists had the dream of returning to Palestine. What they were running from. I mean, it's easy to forget all that stuff.
It's easy to forget. 67 war screwed us over, okay?
67.
We got a civilian population that didn't want to be ruled by us. We claimed it was the most humane occupation in mankind, right? But it isn't like that because we judge it according to Western standards. It's again, we're coming back to the word kavod, right? The honor. Respect. We didn't give them honor. We didn't give them enough respect.
I was first talking about where my tree might be.
He's fixated on his darn tree.
That's what the movie's about.
That movie's about.
Yeah. Listen, somebody got my brother for his bar mitzvah. 1/8 of a dunam of land has been reclaimed from the swamps or something. That was what he got for his bar mitzvah.
You know, that sells. That sells, right?
But what is it selling?
You know,
The idea of Israel, the idea of a nice Jewish state. And
we think about these blue boxes with Israel in white.
I remember that when I was a kid.
But it's a nice way to pay yourself, pay off,
Yeah.
I didn't go to shul today.
For you,
It's like him to Karen
I
Kayemet.
used to think Karen was a person, Karen.
Yeah, Karen.
Why are they giving money to Karen? Who the hell's Karen?
Consider yourself being part of the, what do you call it? The damn it, English, Hamamatz HaMeshutaf.
The collective effort?
Collective effort of making this country into not only stone and sand. The idea is brilliant to plant trees here, right? In the Middle East with the rotten rainfall, not like in Vancouver or Toronto, right? And those trees catched on. And your trees, even if it burned down a year after, right, or 2 years after, it reseeded itself, right?
It doesn't have to be a particular tree, one tree. It's just like the renewal of life.
It's the forest. And up there on the Carmel Mountain, nobody plants trees now, after the fire, because it renews itself. The seed survived it, right? And that's the importance. The good thing we do survives and renews, right?
So even two people who had grown despondent and angry over the state of the country still believed in the power of the trees. In walking through these decades-old pine forests, it was easy to understand why. You could almost forget you were in Israel, and instead imagine yourself in some other country, just as the fathers had dreamed. But I wasn't in some other country. I was in Israel, and I was about to find my tree. By now, I'd learned enough to figure it must be in Canada Park. It seemed unlikely that it was in either of the two small towns Orit had mentioned with their measly few thousand Canadian trees. Millions were going to be planted in Canada Park. My brother had donated one, and it had opened the year after my bar mitzvah. It all added up. Of course, I also knew by now that I wasn't going to find a pine with my name on it. But I might pass it by, learn a bit about the place, and that would be good enough. The JNF had, of course, completely shut me down by this point, so I found someone else to walk me through it.
This is an interesting story.
His name is Eitan Bronstein Aparicio, and he often leads tours here through an organization he started called Zochrot, which means we remember.
In the 70s, after the JNF started to build this.
And what Eitan wants to remember is what was here before there was a forest. Of course, being Israel, before covers a lot of history. Over the centuries, these grounds have been occupied by Israelites, Romans, Ottomans, and most recently, Arabs. In fact, until 1967, less than a decade before the park opened, there were 3 Arab villages here. One was called Beit Nuba, another Yalu. The third was Imwas, and that's the one Eitan wanted to tell me about.
Context. Here is what they called a Roman bathhouse. Right. It's written here, Beit Mechatz Romi, and Emmaus. Before it was Emwas, the Roman called it Emmaus Nicopolis, the city of the Romans that was here. It's probably the most popular JNF park in Israel. Huh. You can still see where people, you know, having their picnic.
Yeah.
There are remains and the metal coming out of the ground, some pieces, and yeah, still. Okay, yes, it's new. It's important for me, this. Again, nothing about Palestinian villages, of course, nothing like this, yes. So let's go and see. Okay.
It's quite beautiful.
Yeah, it is. So here there is all information about the bathhouse. Mm-hmm. Now this is closed. It's new that it's closed. It was always open. But what is important, this is what they refer to as a bathhouse. See the dome up there? People with some common knowledge don't have to be historian or architecture to know that, or architects to know that this is not Roman, but this is a Muslim tradition of building, the dome. This photo is from 1958. This is Emwas. This is the Abu Baida ibn Jarrah shrine. That is this structure. You see the 3 domes are here. Yeah. This is the structure. This almond tree is still here. It's old and ill, but it's still there. Okay. Yeah. So, and this is, you see coffee house, you see people around here, and here was the village. So this photo, you can see it taken from there, and you can see all the village was here. So when Israel occupied this place in 1967, this is what they found. So you see, it was a shrine known as for Abu Baida, that is an important Muslim leader from the 7th century that took over, was one of the leaders of the Arab army around here. Early 80s, the Israeli antiquities or whatever authority did this excavation, and they exposed underneath the Roman bathhouse. Since then, they refer to it only as a Roman bathhouse in all their publications, even though they know, of course, that it's also honoring Abu Baida. So this is the way to deny the Palestinian history here. Now, as you see in the photo, very clear. This structure here is here. You see, it's the same structure, the almond tree, from the same angle, 1968, that the village is totally destroyed. So it was
1 year after.
Yes, it was destroyed 3 weeks after.
He showed me photos of the destruction and expulsion, taken by an Israeli army photographer. What they couldn't bulldoze, they dynamited. There are conflicting accounts as to whether or not people were killed inside their homes. Most ended up on the road to Ramallah.
You are not allowed to expel population under occupied territories, and of course not to destroy their homes and to prevent their return. Right. All these are war crimes, definitely, yes.
It all happened so quickly. For years, all that remained were the ruined houses, the fruit trees, cactus. Then came the idea for a park.
So this is a photo from 10 years later, from 1977. So the Canada Park was started in the early 70s. So you can still see the shrine, the almond tree, the road is passing here, the landscape becoming a park, a cacao park, and then 1988, when the trees are high and you hardly see the shrine that is here between the trees. And for me, this photo is very much like slogan that Kakal still use in their advertisement. They say that we are blooming the deserts, making the desert bloom. We make the deserts, and then we make it green and bloom, you know, beautiful European trees.
Could be one of mine, right?
Yeah, yeah, can be. Wow. So maybe maybe one of your trees was really one of the first ones, yeah.
Through his organization, Eitan pushed to have a sign put up to recognize the lost villages. It stands over the graveyard.
Ayalon Canada Park have historical site, and the Mouse Nicopolis. All this is the old narrative that they write everywhere. And then, at one point here, it says, the villages Emuas and Yalu existed in the territory of the park here until the year of 1967. In Emuas lived 2,000 people, since then living in Jordan and Ramallah. Now, this is very clean language, as you see. There's no war, no expulsions, no refugees, no nothing. But our lawyer advised us and told us, look, we're never going to have more than that. So this is a very interesting interview with Michal Katorza, and she's the responsible for the signage of Kakal. She says, it's only this park with mentioning this, but in fact, many of the parts of the JNF are on lands that there were Palestinian villages in the past, and the forests are to cover the issue. Le'asvot, to disguise the issue. Now, the stones that we are walking here, that you see, very probably are stones of Emuas houses that were built. This is new, of course. I mean, this is built by Kakal. They took the stones from the houses that were just here. In all this area, there were many houses.
You could have been a child born here and come back and be walking along stones that once were in your house.
Yeah. I came here with Palestinians that were born here, and it's quite a shock.
Right. But now it's really starting to hit me. What if, just for example, this was the tree planted in my name?
Yeah.
If 40 years ago, it's literally sitting on the remains, although you wouldn't know it unless I was talking to you, of this village. It's very powerful to actually be...
Yeah. No, of course, I understand. I think it's very much our story, your story, our personal story also. Unfortunately, we are in the side that has to take responsibility for the destruction.
Why deny that there used to be Arab villages?
Because if you tell it openly, the whole story and the whole information, it raises a very serious question of the morality of the establishment of this state. It's if you start to dig in the story, you get into troubles if you are a decent person. I mean, and then you must question your very foundation.
I was starting to do just that.
Why would someone have given me a tree to be planted in Israel? What's behind all that? Where did that come from?
Planting that tree is one element of a massive and rather sophisticated fundraising machinery.
Obviously, there was another side to the JNF story. I turned to someone who'd spent a lot of time digging into it.
But it also has the advantage that it's tangible, and it also has the advantage that it's a tree, and it also has the advantage that it's green, and it also has the advantage that over the decades, more trees have been planted inside Israel relative to any other country that is a member of the United Nations organization. That is sort of a flagship slogan for the JNF. We are dealing with the greening of the country and with the environment and with water husbandry. We are a charitable organization. They don't often say, if at all, that afforestation project veils Arab villages destroyed and leveled down under the cover of the 1948-49 war and subsequent years, and their people ethnically cleansed and rendered stateless refugees.
And my tree's part of that.
Yep.
Karen Kayemet LeIsrael, Jewish National Fund. For 110 years, we have been working on behalf of the Jewish people, building new communities, land development for agriculture, research and development, afforestation and ecology, education, water economy, ties with the diaspora, tourism and leisure. KKL JNF. That's Zionism.
The JNF is a rich organization. It is today probably the largest real estate development inside the state of Israel. This tax exemption is worth a lot of money. So no wonder that they congratulate themselves for the good advice they got back in the 50s and 60s to register as a charity.
So let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say that their intentions were honorable to exist as a charity at the beginning.
I don't agree that their intentions were charitable.
So they never really should have been
registered as a charity. That's right. It's a charity complicit with ethnic cleansing. The Israeli army did the ethnic cleansing, but they are complicit.
I had one day left in Israel. I spent it heading down to the Negev, which had come up a few times in conversation. You ought to go see it, people had said. The JNF is doing wonderful work down there, making the desert bloom. Entire forests were going up, seemingly overnight. Others had a different story to tell.
This is the way Bedouin used to build houses, and around it they used to have this place for the cereals and the water wells.
I was shown around by Haya Noach, a woman who's devoted her life to peace. Even she was surprised to learn what was going on down here.
It is very difficult to have the narrative of the other. Really, you have to be really curious and, in order to look for it. And most of the Israeli doesn't want to know what happened here before 48, who was here, who wasn't here, because, our education system, in a way, deceives us, that we are studying the facts that we were always here, and this is our forefatherland, and nobody was here. It is very, very difficult to challenge it. Mm-hmm. It's taking time. And it took me some time, I have to admit.
What part of the tree is playing in all that? How do they fit into the big picture?
Trees are there, you cannot do anything about it.
In other words, if I plant one of those trees over there, I'm helping to control the land.
Yeah. This is the idea. This is the idea of JNF. They are involved in dispossessing the Arab people in the Negev. And you are now visiting El Arakib area, but there is a village of Atir. The plan is to turn him into a forest. There is a village of Sawa, same thing. They deceive the people, and I think they also deceive their donors, because I think at least part of the donors, if they would know exactly what their money are going to, they would think twice about their donation.
Hello.
Shalom Aleichem.
לאן אתה הולך?
Haya then offered to introduce me to the Sheikh of Al Arakib. Sheikh Sayah Al Turi was born in 1949, 1 year after the founding of the modern state of Israel, or what Arabs call Al Nakba, the disaster.
This is where the village used to be.
And how many people lived here?
About 75 families in different locations, so year round.
זה שיש להם זכות על הקרקע.
כן, לא רק פה, גם באבו ג'אבר וגם...
זה שלנו, זה הכל של הטורי.
75 משפחות, הם גרו פה ושם.
לא, גם בצד השני, וגם על יד הכביש.
Yeah, people used to live in all this direction he showed you.
אז המדינה היא לא רוצה להכיר בנו כבעלים והיינו פה. היא טוענת שהמדינה והעם היהודי הוא היה לבנינו כאן. אבל אנחנו על האדמות האלה מ-1905. אם למשל האדמות האלה לא אדמות שלנו, מי קבור כאן? את הבדואים ועקר אותנו מהחיים הטובים שלנו ושותלים את העצים, שתים רואים. כל מה שאתם רואים, הכל. איפה אנחנו נמצאים? איפה?
So are these all cacao trees now we're looking at?
Yes, all of those on the horizon that you see on the hills are JNF trees.
I couldn't help but think that if my bar mitzvah had been today, my tree might have been planted right here.
כי אנחנו מתייחסים לכל עץ קק"ל שהוא בתור שוטר פושע שהוא עומד מול העיניים שלנו.
Watching it.
The Sheikh was in a hurry to get somewhere, so he handed me over to his son, Aziz.
Here. When my grandfather bought this land in 1905.
He started by showing me his family's ownership papers.
And the man that he sold the land for my grandfather.
Okay. So how many signatures do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a lot of witnesses.
Yes.
Aziz then took me on a tour of his family's lands, a vast area that had once teemed with trees.
Okay, when you came to visit here, you see all of the area trees, everything green.
Fruit trees.
Yes, fruit trees. I had chicken, I had sheep and goats. I have milk all of the time. And I can live. Every house have a garden. Our life so beautiful.
Until the day the bulldozers came.
He drive around the water here, full gas. And then the stones begin to fill inside.
Yeah.
It's a good water.
Yeah.
We can use it here. From July 2010 until yesterday, they destroy our village 93 times.
93?
93 times, yes. In 2010, it was the black day for us.
They just showed up. Tell me what you saw.
At 3 in the morning from 27 from July, they beginning to enter Al Arakib. Car after car, car after car, after car, after car. Here in Al Arakib, we was 1,700 police from different units. Horses, police. UAV unit. Soldiers. Helicopters in the sky. When you look there, they destroy everything, and all of them with guns. All of them was like directors, and all of them covers. You didn't see only the eyes. All of them with black, and you see only the eyes. Why they put our trees? Only because these trees belong for Arabs. They want to delete our history. Until now, all of our children hit the police, hit the soldiers, hit UAV unit, hit the green patrol, hit the GNF. hit them because they show the bad.
And they're teaching them to hate the Jew.
No, yes, but I thank God and I thank the Jew activists that came here.
Yeah.
This is the important for me. The Jew came here and bring food, and then my children, he grow without hitting Jew. I born here, 1974. I born here. And by my hand, I planted trees. By my hand, I cultivated the land with horses and with camels. And now they say it's not your land. I will learn my children. All of the time, this is your land. This is your land. I see clear. The land, it's the start of the life. If you have land, you have everything. You can cultivate it. You can dream.
I'd come to Israel to find my tree, an innocent abroad. Now all that innocence had been stripped away. My search had taken me many places, taught me many things, surprising things. Now that I knew the truth about my tree, what was I going to do about it? If I was going to find the answer, it wasn't going to be in Israel's forests. It was going to be here, at home. I wanted to talk to the rabbi who'd presided over my bar mitzvah, but he'd long since died. So I dropped in on one I'd recently seen in action, overseeing the bar mitzvah of my nephew. This particular synagogue is unaffiliated. So unaffiliated that it holds its services in a church. Do you think a 13-year-old should... Am I responsible for that tree? The purposes to which it was put?
You're asking very rich and complicated questions. And I think there are a number of threads that elements to the question and ways of engaging with it, I think. A boy becoming bar mitzvah basically meant he becomes of the age of majority, and he's responsible for taking on the mitzvot, Jewish sacred action. And his father is no longer responsible for his mistakes, basically. The father would say a blessing, basically thanking God for releasing me from punishment connected to my child. Kid, now it's up to you.
I guess I'm just looking for some rabbinical guidance on what to do about the fact that my tree is part of this cover-up of this terrible crime that really, it was a crime that was committed.
There are very complicated political, economic dimensions to countries coming into existence, the wars that created different boundaries at different times. So one question is, what's our responsibility in understanding the parallel Jewish and Palestinian histories and experiences? So what does justice look like in terms of acknowledging history, important questions about what repair can be done? It doesn't mean erasing Israel, that Israel shouldn't exist, not by any means. But what does it look like to totally advocate for, well, first of all, to understand that two peoples see this same area of the world as home, as holding deep historical roots, religious and spiritual significance. There's a question of what does it mean to hold with respect the history and memory of what actually happened. By all means, criticize and take issue with policies and advocate for justice. But it slides into anti-Semitism when Israel's very existence is rejected.
Do you think that my search for my tree rises to or lowers to anti-Semitism?
No, I don't. I think I think it's an important exploration of truth. Then it's up to you what you decide to do with it.
Right.
So to tell the story and say, this terrible thing happened to those who were living in that village is one thing. And then what happens next for you in terms of your relationship with Israel, with Palestinians, with Jewish life there and here, and what do we do actively in the present, sort of as a way to carry the roots forward. I think those can be not only symbolic, but actual forms of repair.
When I asked what form of repair I might make, she said, look no further than the trees.
Especially in the book of Psalms, there are lots of different ways that trees are used as a metaphor for how we should be. What does it mean to be a righteous person? It's not ethereal, it's not removed from the world, but we look at different kinds of trees as models. Ah, right, I should be deeply rooted, constantly nourished from divine source. So in Psalm 92, the special psalm for Shabbat, we say, Tzadik katamar yifrach ke'erez balvanon yiskeh. The righteous will blossom like the palm tree, and they're planted like the cedar of Lebanon. Tzadik katamar yifrach ke'erez balvanon yiskeh.
So in the very moment that my parents had given me that tree, they'd also given me responsibility for it. And that meant I would need to perform some act of repair for the injustice committed in my name. But before I did that, I had to know one thing. Were they aware, when they gave me that gift, that they were connecting me forever to a war crime? So I went to see John Goddard, the first journalist to write about Canada Park in the mainstream press. His article came out in Saturday Night Magazine in 1981. My tree was 5 years old.
Here's the Saturday Night article.
Yeah. I was hitchhiking around.
While in university, John had taken an interest in Israel. His curiosity piqued by a couple of books that had just come out.
Palestinian concerns were almost not known at all in 1970 in Canada. At all. Because by 1970, PFLP.
Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine.
Thank you. And of course the PLO, very active, hijacking planes, blowing up planes, terrible things. And they're asking, well, who are these people? Why are they so angry? It was groundbreaking. They got called a lot of, unpleasant names. I did my own trip in '73 as a student, a kind of thesis that I was doing. That was on the Palestinian refugee camps. I went to Lebanon, Syria, Jordan. I was doing a lot of reading on the Middle East, anything I get my hands on. And I see that the first article in that issue mentions Canada Park in passing. Caught my eye, and I knew that this was controversial and that these villages had been destroyed during the Six-Day War, and that the park had been built on top of it. It was just a bit obscure. It hadn't hit the mainstream.
Yeah.
I thought, here's a story.
He pitched it to Saturday Night and was soon on his way back to Israel, this time to tell a story that no one in Canada, my parents included, would have known.
This is from who?
He's the Mukhtar of Emwas. He's saying that the Israelis lied, probably, when they told Canadian contributors that there was nothing there, and they were planning to put a park in that area. In fact, there was a village called Emwas, where we have been living for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
I found Amos Kenan, the Israeli soldier, and his report.
Canada Park is steeped in controversy.
Kenan's report would be featured in a CBC investigation many years later.
It is a park with no peace.
Soldiers were breaking down and crying and not wanting to carry out the order, and they tried to get the order reversed and trying to find out who made the order.
The platoon commander decided to go to headquarters and find out if there were any orders about what to do with them. He returned saying that there were no orders in writing, simply that they were to be driven out.
It was very factual for him. Where's the written order? And there was no written order. But, you know, they did what they had to do.
And what was the rationale for that, doing what they had to do?
Well, this is important. There was a piece of land sticking out right over the main Tel Aviv-Jerusalem highway. The Israelis had tried to take that in the War of Independence in 1948, had failed, lost a lot of people, and they failed because the Arab armies had the heights. They knew they had to have it. So when they had the chance to overrun it,
they did.
They did it, and they did it ruthlessly,
yes.
And they did it with an intention of keeping it.
Did the way the IDF carried out the destruction of those villages, did it have to happen that way?
You know, did it have to happen that they were bulldozed? You know, this I don't know. It was ruthless. But gee, the survival of Israel was at stake, literally. We know that. I'm conflicted a bit myself, coming on camera here. I'm a supporter of Israel. There's so much Israel bashing and anti-Semitism, pure and simple. I don't want to be part of that. I don't want to be seen to be part of it. But you asked me to talk about Canada Park, and it's just important to get at the truth. You know, however it kind of falls out. The Jewish National Fund solicited charitable donations from Canada, from Canadians, and used it to cover up this bulldozing of the villages. It is built on a lie, and they're lying about it until this day. They still do. They didn't tell any of the donors. You know, donors, if they're going to give money, they should know about what they're doing, that's all. Or what they're contributing to. That's fair.
So my parents didn't know. Most people didn't. And somehow, despite John's article and the CBC report, people continued not to know. How was that possible? How had the story been buried all over again? It looked like I might get the answer when JNF Canada agreed to an interview. It started off well. After getting a tour of the office, we sat down for the interview. I wanted to talk about how I learned that my tree is covering what was once a village. I wanted to ask if my parents should have known. I also wanted to know about the good work they do. I wanted to have a conversation, open, honest. But the spokesman decided that I was there to politicize the trees. And that was that. I knew there were people out there who were deeply critical of the JNF. I'd read about them. About a former board member who resigned in protest. About an organization out to strip the JNF of its charitable status. A group called Stop the JNF. But I wasn't there to speak on their behalf. I was there to speak on mine. I'd learned I'd been made an accomplice to a cover-up, and I was still trying to figure out what to do about it. So I turned to the people I'd read about. Maybe they could help me. This is Seth Morrison, a longtime supporter of the JNF.
They're very happy when they can control the message, but if they think there's the slightest disagreeing, then they're not willing.
For 25
As a member of the JNF board in Washington, D.C., he helped raise money for projects in Israel.
I would sit down with you. Tell me what you love about Israel. If you said, I love those settlers, they're so brave, I wish I could live, you know, in a settlement, how can I help them?
But everything changed for Seth after the JNF in Israel tried to force a Palestinian family out of their home in East Jerusalem.
JNF tried to purchase some homes under what Israel called the absentee property law. They passed a law that if the owner of the home doesn't live in the home became state property. This was totally targeted to Palestinians.
Okay.
No democratic country would accept a law like that. But that's the law in Israel.
And it allowed the JNF to take over these homes and give them to a settler group. But to hide their involvement, they were doing it through a subsidiary.
So JNF said, it's not me. We didn't do it. You know, it's their building. And it was only in the court case that some Palestinians had brought in the Israeli Supreme Court that forced the JNF to admit that they were really the owner of the home. This all comes up, and I'm really unhappy. And I started asking questions and being given very fuzzy answers. And I was really upset. That's when I decided that I had to resign from the DC board. and wrote the op-ed as well as a letter with my resignation.
Seth's not the only one who went from supporting the JNF to openly challenging it. I went to visit two cousins from Ottawa who went on a similar journey and now are questioning whether JNF Canada should be considered a charity at all.
So I went to like a Jewish day school from kindergarten all the way through high school. Yeah, I always dreamt of going to Israel because this was like, to me, just such an interesting, exciting, important place to my identity.
You know, you get off the plane and they say, welcome home. You know, and I think for Jews living as a minority, you know, here and around the world, there's something that's quite intoxicating about feeling like you're in the majority and that it's yours.
I was never told a word about the Palestinians. I had never heard the word Palestine ever uttered. It wasn't uttered in my home and in that bubble that I was brought up in.
Wow.
Never once mentioned.
As they grew up, Tyler and Corey began re-educating themselves, reading the works of Noam Chomsky, Edward Said, and the new Israeli historians like Ilan Pappé, who used archival material to reframe the story of Israel's founding, pointing to Plan Dalet, which called for the expulsion of Arabs from conquered territories.
What he described was actually a conscious and deliberately planned campaign to expel the native inhabitants of Palestine at the time in order to establish a Jewish demographic majority.
The JNF did its part by putting together the Village Files, a comprehensive survey of Arab Palestine, which was later used by the IDF as it systematically, ruthlessly, took over towns and villages in 1948, forcing countless thousands to leave their homes. The same fate that awaited the people of Imwas.
It's shocking to see that that was how it unfolded. After being brought up with these ideas of Israel was the victim, that the surrounding Arab armies came in and wanted to drive the Jews into the sea.
And that really came up against what I was seeing with Israel and thinking like, man, almost my entire community is just regurgitating this narrative and ignoring what's clearly happening.
So we did our homework, we did a ton of research, and we put together this comprehensive complaint document submitted to the Canada Revenue Agency and to the Minister of National Revenue. JNF Canada is not fit to have charitable status. It doesn't fit the definition of a charitable organization in Canada. It is essentially founded on discriminatory principles.
The allegations in the complaint, which went far beyond tree planting, were covered in a CBC story. The JNF denied it all. But for the cousins, just being heard was a kind of victory.
We're up against a lot. We're relatively small as an organization, mostly volunteers. The JNF brought in something like $30 million in 2016.
Which is maybe why some people are taking it to the streets. Like this woman, Sue Goldstein.
When my mother died, we were freaking out, crying at her graveside. The woman from the funeral parlor comes up and gives me an envelope, and I open it, and they've planted a tree for my mother. And I'm still angry about that. I couldn't do anything at that moment because I was real close with my mother. And I'm weeping, and they're giving me this fucking tree. And then the rabbi tears up this little packet, and we're right in front because we're the immediate family, and he's pouring the land of Israel in my hand. I'm like, he's pouring Palestine in my hand, and I'm putting it on my mother. And I just thought, this is so fucked. And I'm still angry about that. To me, it's manipulative. We're here as a counter-presence. We're a visual demonstration.
A demonstration that not everyone on this walk for Israel appreciates.
It's hard because it can be really emotional. You know, they shout really racist, misogynist things like, you like Sharia law girls? Is that what you like? They call us whores and capos and, you know.
You guys are a joke. You guys kill and slaughter little kids.
Sonny.
You guys support murder, terrorism? You come to my country, Canada?
You're not even your country. You're occupying stolen land. You're a fucking.
Canada's a stolen country.
Okay, guys, let's
just let the pedestrians, eh?
Didn't totally anticipate how negative the response would be. I really thought that more of my friends would understand this and would be sympathetic. But I was wrong.
You lost a lot of friends?
Yeah, I did.
So the rabbi that bar mitzvahed me and married my parents and all that, and had lots of conversations with him, eventually said that I've been poisoned and didn't want to speak to me anymore.
It's a war. You know, the people we're opposing and the programs we're opposing have a lot of power and a lot of money. Change is slow, but if you reach one person, that's a lot.
I admired all these folks for standing up for their beliefs, for taking action, putting themselves on the line, risking relationships, careers, reputations. As I struggled to come up with my own response, just knowing they were out there made me realize I wasn't alone.
I mean, you didn't knock down that village, but your 15th cousin from the same shtetl in Poland did knock down that village. And I think we do have some collective guilt. We have to share that land. We have to give them every opportunity that I have. You know, we are not going to have peace and true solution until we resolve that and until these people are treated fairly.
I had all this on my mind as I traveled across the country to meet the man who'd built Canada Park. Remember the guy whose name I kept seeing on documents in the JNF archives? Harris D. Gulko?
Hello.
We meet at last.
He's still very much around.
I started with the JNF of Canada in 1953. 10 years later, in 1963, I was asked to become the national director.
Right.
And then in 1979, I lived my life's dream of moving to Israel, and I lived in Israel for 28 years. So my record with JNF, well, it goes back even earlier. It goes back to when every Thursday I got what we called a payday nickel. My father got paid in cash, and he gave me a nickel, but he put a quarter in the blue box. And every time I saw that, I bristled. So it took me a number of weeks until I finally burst out and I said, "You love that darn blue box more than you love your own son." He said to me, "Son, the money that I give you, you'll go and spend on candy or whatever, and that's okay. But this 25 cents goes to buy land in Palestine. If you would please me, when you grow up, you'll work and try to get Palestine back into the hands of the Jews." And in a very genuine way, I lived up to his expectations. At one point, I had just about every wedding and bar mitzvah in Toronto commemorated by the planting of trees.
Including, of course, mine.
I never asked anybody for money. I just gave them a good reason to give money.
So tell me how you put those skills to use in building Canada Park.
I was in Israel with the national president of JNF, and the high mucky bucks took us out to an empty field outside what turned out to be Canada Park, halfway between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. They told us this area has just recently come into the possession of the state of Israel, and we'd like to create facts on the ground. What can you suggest? So I said, oh, this would be a marvelous place to have a park that we would call in the name of Canada. So one of the guys said, how would you go about starting this? Well, I would want to jumpstart it. We'd get a minyan, 10 people, each to plant 10,000 trees and contribute $100,000. So the president, his name was Bernard, he said, and Harris, how do you think we would get 10 people each to give $100,000? Bernard, frankly, I thought you'd be the first one. And that's how it started. That's how it started. Chutzpah.
It was a good story, but something was missing. What happened to my tree? I mean, one thing I learned is that there were 3 Arab villages there, right up till '67. So presumably that's what this fellow who said to you when you were standing there at the origin story, this land has recently come into our possession and we need facts on the ground. So what was your understanding in that moment of what that all meant? Were you aware of the villages? Did it matter? What did you?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
That I'm just trying to understand what you understood from the person who said to you, "We want a forest here." What do you think he meant by facts on the ground? The trees, literally?
He felt it wasn't simply enough to possess it by occupying it with an army. It would be much better if there was something on it. Ideally, maybe immediately a new Israeli village, but that involves quite a time, and not to speak of money. Whereas a forest is relatively easier.
Yeah, and pines grow quickly.
Yeah.
And was there an awareness of the existence of those villages? Did it enter the discussion at all? Was it even
I don't
consciousness?
remember any evidence of Arab villages having been there. They may have been. I do remember archaeological remains of ancient villages, whether they were Jews or non-Jews or Greeks or Romans. I don't know. The archaeologists may have known, but I just recall stones and whatever and so on.
Yeah.
Were there Arab villages there? I honestly don't know. I don't recall seeing any. What I feel is has been left out of international discussion. If you want to reject the concept that possession is 9 points of the law, which is what Israel can say, if you want to go by historical connection, who was there first, then we were there a hell of a lot before the Arabs. There's many evidences of Jewish settlement going back hundreds and thousands of years. There were no Muslims. There were no Muslims. There was never a Palestine. I mean, the anti-Semites managed to convince the world that there is such a thing as Palestine, that there was a Palestine, that there were Palestinians.
Let me take you back to the origins of Canada Park for a second, if you don't. Do you mind talking about this stuff? So when I got to Canada Park, I ended up walking through it with a gentleman a Jewish Israeli, who has taken it upon himself to have signage put up to acknowledge signs to acknowledge the existence of those villages.
Existence
of the Arab villages that once were there.
Are you talking about an Arab?
No, he's an Israeli Jew, and he, through his organization, had these. They're very unobtrusive. You'd have to know where they are to see them. But he described to me, showed me pictures of the villages and thing, and I went there, and all of a sudden I went, well, this is my tree. It's standing
in the middle
of someone's home. And I felt bad. Was I wrong to feel that?
No. No. I'm trying to think of how I would feel if I saw a tree planted in my honor and it was proven to me that this had been a home of Ahmed. I would try to understand how this came about. I would want to know, did Ahmed leave the village voluntarily? I know that to be a fact. I spoke to Israelis who were there at the time. They sent messengers to the Mufti, the head of the villages, and said, we have nothing against. We're talking now at a time when the state was created and Israel was given permission to occupy this land. Arab nations came and told the villagers, leave so that we can fight the Jews and not hurt you. We only want to hurt the Jews. So you go away, and then you'll be able to come back and have even more land. Mm-hmm. So they, I think I can say, became Quislings. Do you know what a Quisling is?
Turncoat, a traitor. Mm-hmm.
So you forfeited the right. Yes, I would say that if a tree were planted in the backyard of a man who voluntarily forfeited his right in the expectation of coming back not only to his land, but the fucking Jew next door.
Mm.
Yeah, I would be able to get my mind around that.
I wasn't there to argue with a man who'd spent his life fulfilling the dream of his father. If he says he didn't know about the villages, I have to take him at his word. I know differently. And I wanted to find some way to acknowledge that I no longer considered myself that 13-year-old boy who'd been used for some dark purpose.
How are you?
So I flew down to Arizona to meet a man who once played in the streets where my tree now stands.
Hi.
This is Moyeh Abdulaziz. We sat in his kitchen, where I showed him footage of my trip to Canada Park.
This is the coffee house.
He knew every footstep in it.
The corner was my grandfather's, my mother's father.
Okay.
Okay. This is his grocery store, little grocery store. And this is another lot that my grandfather used to plant. Okay. The other side of it is our house. Okay. This is the street here, and this goes all the way to Ramallah.
Was this your world every
This
day?
is my world. This is my world, exactly.
Was there any inkling at the time that there was trouble ahead?
No. We never thought that something that drastic could happen. That's a complete erasure of a community, completely.
Moyeh wasn't there the day the soldiers came. He was away at university in Jordan. One day in June of 1967, word spread on campus that war had broken out and Israel was victorious.
When you hear, this thing that is Hamas is gone, but what does that mean? To anybody, it's gone, okay, yeah. But I don't know what happened to my mother, my father, my sisters, my brother, my uncle, my cousins, nothing.
And he wouldn't know, not until his family, having walked the 60 miles from Imwas, showed up at his school.
It was like you're numb. It was a big blow to let's say, to the psyche of the young people at the time, is so fast. You know, you have a place like Hamas that existed for 3,000 years, okay, and it's just gone with a bulldozer, okay, by somebody giving orders. There was no hand extended that says, you know, we understand your situation, but let's try, you know. You do not belong here. We are your destiny. There's no going back.
No going back. So Moyet went forward, eventually to Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, as a teacher to oil industry workers and their families. It was in the American enclave of Haran that he met the woman he would eventually marry, Helen, who was going back to teach in Arizona, and invited Moyet to come with her. He created a new life in Tucson, but he never forgot his homeland.
I am Palestinian and a proud one, and a lot of Palestinians, they find it easier to not do that, you know.
By the time the Oslo Accords were signed in 1993, with their promise of peace, and maybe even a Palestinian state, Moyet was a U.S. citizen. He decided the time had come to show his family his birthplace, which he'd last seen as a teenager.
We arrived there at the airport. We go to the passport control, and they have different booths, so there are special booths for their friends, the Americans. So since I had a U.S. citizen passport, so we went to that. We got to the window, and then the officer looked at our passports and put them down. He looked at me and she said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Is that my passport?" Now, my passport had the country of birth. I had Palestine in it. Okay? And she didn't expect that answer. And so she said, "Welcome to Israel." I said, "We're not coming to Israel." And then kicked me, you know, "Let's go."
After reuniting with his cousins near Ramallah, Moyet returned to Imwas, or what remained of it, beneath the trees, going back on the same road his family had once been forced to leave by.
As we were approaching, it was just, I don't think I said the word or anything for a long time. My mind was going in 1,000 directions as all these memories and all. I was carrying a video camera with me, and we're going and recording. And as I remember, I was, could hear I was, hurrying to go to what else I can see, because, I had to be, my cousins were showing me, because you couldn't identify the places, because the weeds were overgrown and the trees, and so you didn't see things the way they were. And then we came to the park, the picnic tables, and you could see as you go on the road that there is these pine trees on the side of that weren't there. Okay, you had to go behind those to start seeing the remains of the houses. because the church was there and that the Sheikh Ubaida monument was there and the bridge was there, it was really easy for me to locate where our house was there. Then we looked and we saw the tile, which I could recognize because it was, you know, black and white, one black, one white tile, so like a chess set. And that's where it, boom, you know. That's where I was. It was like, oof. Yeah, it is real. It is real. And when I saw the picnic tables and the thing, it was much harder because they come to have fun. And it's there, and they go look at the plaques with the names, so money to celebrate my destruction.
And my tree is one of those?
The tree is one of those. Actually, it is. I've never was involved in this. Of course, you had no informed choice. It's not like you decided to do that. But that is what, to me, that Israel is a campaign of ignorance. That is, people are not told that this is what we're doing.
Yeah. But now I know. And sitting across from this man, whose house I was helping to cover up, I wondered, was this my act of repair? That by telling my story, I tell his?
I think it would be nice to go home. If I had the opportunity, you know, to go to Hamas and have a little place, it would be another era in our history, and hopefully it will be together. That is not separated, one people, that despite all the disasters, the tragedies, the crimes, whatever you want to call them, people can be good, can be human, and can build together and set up a model for humanity. Is that we can. I hope that one day we'll plant other trees together, okay, with our own will.
I would like that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. We make it happen. And it will be great if it does.
In the pines, where the sun never shines, I shiver when the cold wind blows. My love,